Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm going to give just a minute for everyone to get logged in. And while I'm doing that, just a couple of housekeeping things. I want to draw your attention to the chat window. There is a link to a blog in that chat window that is going to be a supplementary material for this webinar. It's going to be on how to present a financial plan in Voyant. That blog is non-region specific, so no matter where you're joining us from today, that should be helpful as far as something that you can take with you and bookmark to use in presentation prep moving forward. Today's webinar, we're going to cover the basics of presenting a plan in Voyant. We will cover the data review portion, timeline, goals, events, let's see, legacy, and presenting proposals as what-if scenarios. This webinar is going to be recorded, and you will receive a recording after the webinar is completed, usually within about an hour. We're not going to open up this webinar for questions. However, if you do have any questions for me after the webinar is completed, you can email me at support@planwithvoyant.com. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to draw your attention to the dashboard. This is where I would usually recommend that you start once a client comes in for their annual review. And just quickly, as you're reviewing with them, I would recommend going through and making sure all of the information you have with them is generally up to date. So for example, you want to go through and just make sure that there's been no changes in annual income since the last time you spoke. There's been no additional investment or savings account that you haven't been made aware of. And then if there is anything that you need to add into the plan, you can always go here to your plus button in the bottom right-hand corner, add something in, or if you need to make an adjustment to an amount, you would just click on that item, make that adjustment, and click done to save. That should be a pretty quick process as far as the presentation portion goes. And then you're going to go into the presentation portion. The timeline is going to be where you're going to have more of a goals-based conversation. I would recommend that this is where you're going to have more of a story-based conversation with your clients. You're going to talk about where their goals intersect with their time and their money. And it's a good opportunity for you to show that whether or not you've been working with them for years or whether or not this is a new client, that you are listening to what it is that they are hoping to achieve throughout their lifetime. So in this client's plan, we have a few different goals that we've already created for them. We've got a general idea of how much they want to be able to spend on general living expenses, on travel in retirement. We know they want to do a kitchen remodel, and we know how much generally they want to be able to contribute to their child's education expenses for university. If we want to review these goals with them, we can do that. If we want to make adjustments to them, we would just click on them, make that adjustment. We can even click and drag if they decide they want to do that kitchen remodel a little bit earlier. We can simply click and drag and drop, and then that refactors when that expense occurs in the plan. Just keep in mind that these goals are trackable expenses in the plan. So if you add a goal into the plan, you do not need to also add in a concurring expense. It's going to be an expense in the plan. And then as you're having those conversations with them, you can also add in additional goals if you need to. So if another goal comes up that you uncover, you can go in here and add in additional goals as well. This is also a good time to ask additional open-ended questions like, what are the goals that are your top priority? If we start running into problems in the plan, what do you want us to prioritize? Are there any concerns that you have about your financial future? And are there any things that you want us to keep in mind as we move forward about things that are important to you? So this is just a good opportunity to have more of a conversation on this portion of the presentation. Once you're done on this screen, you would want to move over to your Let's See section. So we're moving kind of left to right here. We're going to go single chart first, and then I would turn on your details button and then just make sure that your legend is on so that you have the ability to turn on and off different items here. I would select hide all and then just start with the red in the chart. And this red is going to reflect the expense profile in the plan. This is all of the expenses, goals, and taxes that we are projecting for the lifetime of their plan. For example, if we take a look at some of the different spikes in the plan, we can see we've got this kitchen remodel, we've got Franklin's university expenses, we can see when they retire, there's some difference in the expenses here, and then we've got a slowing down event at age 75. So we can talk about how we are currently planning on meeting all of their expenses. We can do that by simply bringing these elements back into the chart. In their pre-retirement years, we're mostly going to be meeting their expenses through their employment income. So we can bring that back in. And then we've got some additional expenses that we're going to need to meet via their university savings for Franklin. And then we also need to top up some of this with the brokerage account. And then we can start bringing in for the retirement years their fixed income from their state pension using their Social Security, and then their qualified accounts via their retirement savings. And then we have some tax returns that we're going to bring into the plan as well. And then from here, we might want to take a look at some of these later years, because you can see this black line, which reflects their total need. So this is the need, meaning their expenses. We have more money once we hit their required minimum distribution years than we need. So maybe we want to have some conversations with them about how we could better utilize these funds. Do we want to spend more in retirement? Do we want to look at maybe retiring a little bit early? Let's take a look at their assets chart and see whether or not they would have plenty of money at the end of the plan to do that. You could even, since we have this illiquid asset here in the form of their main residence, we could pull that out of the chart and just look at their liquid assets, and we can see that they would have 3.9 million in liquid assets left over at the end of the plan. So that might spark an additional conversation with them about how we could better utilize this money. Is that something that they want at the end of this plan? Do they want to leave that to their son, or do they maybe want to look at some other options for better utilizing this money throughout their retirement? So this is, again, some more open-ended questions that can be proposed to them while we're looking at these different charts. And we can even go to the legacy section via Overview Legacy, and we can show them, as of right now with their current plan, what they're expected to leave. And this would be liquid and illiquid assets to Franklin. If they were to pass at age 90, 5.3 million. We're not currently expecting any estate tax since they're under the estate tax threshold for the US. So we can see what it is that they would be leaving to Franklin, whether or not that's what they currently hope to do, or whether or not they might want to look at some other scenarios. So if we did want to look at some other scenarios, we could go to Insights, and I would recommend that you have a couple of different ideas in mind depending upon their response to these questions and these conversations. So for example, I might scroll down to our retirement spending insight. So we currently have them spending $60,000 a year just for annual spending, and then $20,000 a year in travel. So let's get an idea of what their maximum spending capacity is. What is their ceiling that we cannot go above and their plan still be successful? Because maybe they don't want to spend everything down to zero. Maybe they do want to leave a little bit to Franklin, but we need to know what are the bounds within this plan with which we have to work. So we know we can't go over 145,000. So that gives us some sort of idea of with which we have to work within. And we can even do this compare to plan. So we've got our insight results up here, and we have where we are today. So we know if we were to spend 145,000 annually, they would be leaving the home and about 200,000 to their son Franklin. So that can give us an idea of what we have to work within. So we might have a couple of pre-planned ideas with which to present to our clients, and then also based on our conversations, be prepared to kind of pivot and also know your insights well enough to present to them a couple of other ideas. But let's look at our what if scenarios that we've already created. So I've got one where they retire a little bit earlier and spend a little bit more, and where they retire at the same year and spend quite a bit more. So let's look at both of those by going to Let's See, Compare Plans Chart View. And this is where you can look at two plans side by side. So based on the information that we have from our retirement spending analysis, we know we can't go above a certain amount. So this would be them spending $15,000 more a year than they currently ask to be able to spend, and getting to retire 3 years earlier. We can still see there's no shortfall in the plan, so no red means good. They'd still be okay. And let's see how much they would have in the plan at the end. So we can see they would still have assets valued at $3.1 million. At the end of the plan, 1.9 of that would be the home, and then a little over $1 million in liquid assets. And that would give them a little bit of flexibility if there were to be any emergencies, like a long-term care need, and then they would still have some assets to leave to Franklin. So that's one plan that we could propose to them. Then we could also go over here and switch to this other one where we're retiring at 65 and spending $90,000 a year. So we could show them this version of the plan and present this idea to them and kind of get a sense for what is more important to them. And we can go from there. Now, let's say, for example, they are fine with working until they're 65 because they want to be able to spend a little bit more. So we could also, from here, now go into, let's say they also have some concerns about whether or not this plan is going to be resilient against market volatility. So we can go in here where we have this $90K retirement goal and also do some insights on this plan. So let's take a look at loss capacity. So this can give us an idea of how much this plan could stand to lose if there were some sort of market loss event. And we'll do a market loss event at Jane's retirement event at age 65. So we can see whether or not this plan is resilient in the face of a major market loss event. So this plan would be able to withstand a loss of around $500,000 at Jane's age 65 and still not experience any shortfall. We can show them how that would affect their asset values. And then we could run a couple more. So we could do a historic insight. We could show them how the plan would react to a selected time period, like the 2008 to 2014 period in the market. And we're using the S&P 500 for the US version. You'll have a different simulation depending on the market that you're using. So we can show them, okay, we've got no shortfall in this insight. Let's compare it to the plan and look at the asset difference. So you can see there's a little less than $1 million difference between the two plans. Still not seeing any shortfall. It would definitely affect your asset value, but you still wouldn't be experiencing any shortfall. And you can do several different ones. I would definitely suggest looking at market crash, maybe running a Monte Carlo, and maybe doing a performance insight, depending on kind of what your client's concerns are. Definitely stress testing these recommended plans is always a good idea if they're concerned about that. And then once you've decided on the plan that you want to move forward with, you can always go to Manage Plans and then update and promote that plan to be your new working plan. And then you can also always go to Overview, Legacy, and even do a comparison of the two legacy outcomes if this is a concern for them, and show them the difference between the wealth transfers to their child so that you can look at it side by side and show them what the difference between the two outcomes would be. And then in your report section, you're also going to have the ability to send them with a report at the end of the day. So you can select the plan that you want to send a report on, or you could even do a couple of different ones if you'd like to. So let's say they just want a report on this 90K retirement goal report. You can use one of your selected report sets or simply go in here and select them on your own if you'd like. So let me use one of my selected report sets. And once you've selected the reports that are relevant to your client situation, you can generate that report and send it with your client at the end of your conversation with them. And then just a couple of things to kind of tips and tricks that I would recommend before you meet with a client. I would definitely recommend practicing that presentation flow, definitely thinking about sort of the left to right flow of what it is that you're wanting to present, going through a couple of insights and making sure that you understand the outputs. And just a couple of things, and again, this is going to be all regions. For these insights, just keep in mind that you do have inline help in these. So anywhere you see these hyperlinks, just remember that you can click on these. So if you have additional questions about how they work, there's usually going to be articles linked in here. Oftentimes there's going to be videos. So you can always click on these inline help links in here if you want to get a little bit more information about how the insights work. And then you can also click the name of your client at any time and hit request support. So if you wanted to ask one of us a question about an insight or ask for assistance in presentation prep or any question in general about your plan, feel free to click that name of your client on the top right, hit request support, and you can enter your question here in the text box and share client access and send that question over to us, and we'd be happy to take a look at your plan, either send you an email response or set up a one-to-one with you directly. I hope that this has been helpful, but if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@planwithvoyant.com or using this method here. And thank you for attending today's webinar. I appreciate it.